Biden promised during the State of the Union address last year, a report card. President Joe Biden will undoubtedly highlight a number of his biggest successes when he gives his second State of the Union address on Tuesday. But that begs the question, did he deliver on his campaign promises from the previous year? His list of top priorities from last March included fighting record-high inflation and mobilizing American backing for Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion. The State of the Union was powerful, he concluded, because you, the American people, are strong. Yet according to a recent ABC News/Washington Post poll, only 36% of Americans believe Biden has done a decent job as president, 62% believe he hasn't done anything at all. Additionally, nearly 6 in 10 Democratic-aligned adults do not want to see Biden nominated again, and his approval rating after 2 years in office is significantly lower than the average compared with the previous 13 presidents. Biden appears poised to run for a second term and is hoping to use this year's speech to make his case. Only one has worse numbers, former President Donald Trump. A summary of what Biden said last year and how things ended out is provided below. Ukraine's conflict. 6 days prior to Biden's first State of the Union address, Russia invaded Ukraine, and he devoted a significant chunk of his speech to denouncing Russian President Vladimir Putin rather than the customary domestic issues. Bipartisan acclaim greeted Biden's warning. Putin has unleashed bloodshed and disorder, but while he may score successes on the battlefield, he will pay a continuing high price over the long haul. According to Biden, the Justice Department is putting together a task force to investigate the crimes committed by Russian oligarchs, and the United States will join its allies in blocking all Russian flights from using American airspace, further isolating Russia and adding an additional squeeze on their economy. The Russian oligarchs and unscrupulous leaders who have stolen billions of dollars from this brutal regime, he added, I say tonight, no more. In order to locate and seize your boats, luxury apartments, and private jets, we are working with our European partners. We are going to take your mischievous profits. It's a warning that the United States heeded. The United States continued to impose sanctions against Russia week after week in the months that followed, targeting both banks and specific people, such as Putin's adult daughters. The U.S. had blocked the assets of Russian oligarchs worth more than $30 billion as of last summer. Additionally, over the past year, the United States has provided Ukraine with more than $24.9 billion in security aid, but it has not put American troops into the conflict, a promise Biden made and has up to this point kept. Let me be clear, our soldiers have not engaged in conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine and will not do so in the future. Our military are heading to Europe to defend our NATO partners, not to fight in Ukraine. According to the most recent ABC News/Washington Post survey, Biden's popularity ratings for how he has handled the battle are just 38%, despite the fact that ordinary Americans seem to be uniting behind the people of Ukraine. USA's economy. Biden moved on to talk about the American economy after tempering expectations about the cost of the domestic battle. I'll be honest with you all, as I've always vowed to do. The costs of a Russian dictator invading a foreign nation are felt all around the world. As stated by Biden, putting prices under control is his primary concern. However, a year after Biden was elected president, 4 out of 10 Americans think their financial situation has gotten worse. This is the highest percentage in 37 years of ABC News/Washington Post polling. Americans only support his management of the economy with 37% of the vote. Biden announced that the United States would release 30 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in an effort to warn Americans that the conflict would raise petrol prices. Later, Biden increased that release to 180 million barrels, which Republicans denounced as being motivated by politics. These actions will reduce domestic gas prices. And I am aware that the news of what is happening can be unsettling. But I want you to know that everything will be all right for us at the time, Biden stated. Gas prices did, however, continue to rise, reaching a summer high and worrying Democrats in the run-up to the midterm elections. In order to combat inflation, Biden promoted several of the Build Back Better tenets, including a cap on prescription medication prices, decreased energy costs, and the implementation of free, universal pre-K, among other initiatives, without ever mentioning the name of the program. He declared, "I have a better strategy to combat inflation. Reduce your expenses, not your salaries." It wasn't looking good for Biden's Build Back Better plan as the year went on, but everything changed after a closely guarded agreement between Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin was made public during the summer. Just before Manchin joined his party to adopt a scaled-back version of the Build Back Better proposal, now known as the Inflation Reduction Act, in a significant triumph for Biden, Democrats, with Republican support, enacted the CHIPS and Science Act, targeted at fighting China. Pandemic of COVID. The president made a notable speech in front of a packed and largely mask-free chamber last year, just one day before Congress repealed the mask law. The vice president declared, "Tonight I can say we are going forward safely, back to more normal routines, because of the progress we've made, because of your resilience and the instruments we have. With severe cases at a level unseen since last July, we've reached a new phase in the fight against COVID-19. To attempt to foresee the unpredictable is deadly, and when cases of the highly contagious Omicron form grew, COVID mortality peaked for the year during the summer." According to data from Johns Hopkins University, more than 267,000 people passed away from COVID in 2017. Despite Americans shifting away from mitigation efforts, the disease is still a leading cause of death in the country. The Biden administration has stated it will officially end the COVID-19 national emergency and public health emergency on May 11 during this year's speech. The current national emergency lasts until March, while the public health emergency lasts until April. "I am aware that some people are discussing living with COVID-19. I assert tonight that we will never only accept surviving with COVID-19 in the past," Biden said. Last year, lawmakers had to enter the chamber with a negative COVID test. Several Republicans boycotted the speech by refusing to take the test. As a result, at least 4 positive instances later emerged, showing that the virus was still active. Police and gun violence. Last year, Biden took a minute to discuss policing as well, drawing applause from Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and other Republicans. "We should all concur that cutting police funding is not the solution. The solution is to fund the police with the tools and instruction they require to safeguard our neighborhoods," added Biden. He then made a brief plea to Congress to enact gun safety laws, stating that doing so would not violate the Second Amendment but rather save lives. "I request that Congress enact policies that have been shown to minimize gun violence. Pass background checks performed globally. Why should someone who is listed as a terrorist be permitted to buy a weapon? Limit the use of assault weapons and large-capacity magazines," said he. "Repeal the liability shield that protects the only American industry that cannot be sued." After the mass shootings at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and the supermarket in Buffalo, New York, Congress did adopt gun safety legislation in May, though it was far from what he requested. The public is increasingly split on the issue as the administration presses lawmakers to extend the long-expired ban on assault weapons, with 47% in favor and 51% against, according to the most recent ABC/Post survey. Despite recent gun violence, that represents a 9-point decline in support since 2019. In the wake of Tyre Nichols' beating and murder, it is obvious that agreement on gun violence and policing legislation is becoming more and more unusual. The president's speech this year is not certain to address gun violence and policing, though. Infrastructure. Last year, Biden celebrated the bipartisan infrastructure law's success and hailed it as a turning point for his presidency. "We are currently ranked 13th in the world for infrastructure. If we don't solve it, we won't be able to compete for the employment of the 21st century," said he. The bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest ever investment to rebuild America, was passed because of this, according to the author. He declared that the United States had had enough of talking about infrastructure weeks and was now moving toward having an infrastructure decade. As money from the legislation begins to flow and projects can be launched, Biden expects to continue his nationwide promotion of his infrastructure program later this week. He spent the week prior to this year's address doing so. The Unity Agenda. Biden proposed a unification agenda for the nation near the end of his speech after going over a number of broad proposals with support from both parties. The cornerstones of the unification agenda, according to him, are combating the opioid epidemic, emphasizing children's mental health, helping American veterans, and putting an end to cancer as we know it. While those initiatives received praise from all sides of the chamber, they are ongoing problems without a certain end in sight. Regarding the level of cooperation in Washington, Biden will speak to the newly elected Republican House majority on Tuesday. Speaker Kevin McCarthy has vowed to obstruct Biden's agenda, but the two looked to get along well during their meeting last week at the White House. That's today's latest news. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment so that this channel can continue to exist. Thank you for listening to the end, and I hope it's useful.